I'm Jim Check. You're watching Now Media with me, Lisa Bildy from I can't even read it right now, from there you go, Free Speech Union of Canada, representing Amy Hamm, who got that $93,000 fine from the College of Physicians and Surgeons there. And I guess the question is, will that ruling of unprofessional conduct stand up in court?
Well, we don't know. We're going to find out. Just a couple of little points. One, there was a finding of unprofessional conduct by her nursing college, the BC College of Nurses and Midwives, and they then gave out the penalty last week, which was a month's suspension and essentially court costs of $93,000. It's very punitive, regardless of what you call it. We have already appealed that decision on finding her conduct to be unprofessional. We've already appealed that to the BC Supreme Court. And we'll probably roll the penalty into that appeal as well. And, we'll see what happens. We think that the disciplinary panel at the college made some legal errors in its decision. Some things just simply don't make sense factually or legally. And we're hoping that we'll get some clarity from the BC court on that. But I certainly hope that the court sees fit to go our way on that.
Yeah, so that's a good thing to clear up, because a lot of people are thinking that it's a fine, but you're saying it's court costs, that's what that it is being assessed to her. And because some people are comparing it to the fine that actually it's a fine that the Jeff Evely got there for walking in the bush there, right? And right. So these are kind of.
Yeah, her punishment was a 1-month suspension. The costs would be applied regardless of what the penalty was. We did manage to get them knocked down from what the college wanted, but essentially that's built right into the legislation that when you defend yourself in these regulatory proceedings, you're going to get hit with costs. And frankly, that's a huge deterrent to people to even bother to fight back. I know here in Ontario, where I am, the College of Physicians and Surgeons of Ontario has a daily tariff of $10,120, I think, that if you have a hearing day, you've got to pay that if you're not successful in defending yourself. So it's very burdensome. And if you think there's a chance you're going to lose, most people just can't take that risk.
Mm-hmm. Amy's got lots of support out there, though. She got a call from actually Pierre Poilievre yesterday. I see that on her X account, and then also J.K. Rowling has retweeted some of her stuff, and so she is garnering some support. She also writes for a couple of newspapers in that as well. So I guess the defense for her is that it's not hate speech. She's just sharing what she believes to be common knowledge out there.
Well, sure, it's not hate speech, and they didn't say that it was. What they called it was discriminatory and derogatory to transgender people, and they couched this in the argument that the regulator of the nursing profession has to make sure that everybody who is a nurse or midwife subscribes to the values of the nursing profession. But they have determined that those nursing values now are transgender friendly, but not gender critical friendly. Essentially, if you have a gender critical perspective, which many, many people do, as you can see from the support, and this, by the way, isn't necessarily discriminatory to trans people. It's just that there are some conflicts that we have to iron out. And we should do that by communicating with one another. But essentially what the college is saying is no, you can't have those opinions and identify yourself as a nurse. They specifically said, actually, that if you're going to advocate for women's rights, you can't do it in a manner that is exclusive of transgender women built into that same category, essentially. So it makes the gender critical advocacy completely impossible if you're a nurse.
So when is her next day in court?
We don't have a date yet, so it probably will be in the new year before we get heard. We have to get some more things filed, and then we'll be setting a hearing date. So it's going to be a long haul, because we'll have that. Hopefully we'll be successful, but if not, or if we are and the college doesn't like it, we may go on to further levels of court. And we also have a couple of human rights complaints that we filed, one against the college and another against Amy's employer, because in British Columbia, political views are a prohibited ground of discrimination in certain contexts, including employment and in trade associations and that kind of thing. So we're taking the position that her gender critical views should be protected speech. And that has been happening in the United Kingdom. We'd like to see that precedent applied here too.
So she could rack up more costs, I guess, if she loses her next court date. Is that correct?
Always a risk when you go to court. Now,
Yeah.
fortunately, her legal fees are being covered by the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms, and any costs that she pays, hopefully her supporters will help crowdfund if and when that happens. At the moment, the costs that she was ordered to pay for this disciplinary hearing are on hold pending the appeal.
Right. And then what does your organization do? You're obviously representing her in this case, and and the fees are being paid by the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms. But what does your group do?
So we've just started something called the Free Speech Union of Canada, and I'm the executive director. In addition to being a lawyer handling a lot of free speech cases, what I've discovered is that there are a lot of people in our country who are dealing with free speech issues and can't afford to fight back. And so I thought, and along with others who joined me on this, that we would follow the UK model. We've got a free speech union there, where it's a member-driven, membership-based organization, non-for-profit, not partisan either, that is explicitly dedicated to defending free speech and sort of effectively crowdfunding the defense amongst all of our members and other donors, because there's some important cases out there to be heard, but people can't take the risk. And frankly, lawyers don't want to take the risk either of cases that are going to require a lot of time and effort, and they don't get paid for them. So there's some good organizations out there that do other things besides free speech. We are just focused on free speech.
Is the Sean Foyt case very similar to that for you as well, like freedom of speech? Like he's trying to go to concerts, and then here in Kelowna, they just canceled his concert here in Kelowna as well.
Yeah, my organization, through my organization, sent a letter of concern to some of the organizations or municipalities, I should say, out east that did it first. These are government bodies that are basically taking a position on a political view. They're not really canceling it for safety reasons. They're saying that, but they would have been perfectly happy to cancel it regardless of whether they had a safety concern. Like in my view, that once they started getting some heat from people that this guy was to be canceled, they just didn't want to stand up for freedom of expression. They just decided that, okay, we'll cancel the event. So yeah, it's similar. I mean, the concern I have is that certain views are just being sort of run out of town, although they happen to be largely, many of them, sort of widely held beliefs. They're not fringe, but somehow municipalities and regulators seem to be governed by a small group of people who think their views are the only ones that should get to be heard.
So back to Amy, look, so she's been suspended for a month, and then when she gets to go back to work, it doesn't sound like she's going to take down any of her comments or change her mind. So does she just get resuspended again, or how does that work?
Well, she's been told essentially by the college that she can't comment while identifying herself as a nurse. And so the college actually, they started investigating her when people complained about the J.K. Rowling billboard she was involved in. But then they went and found hundreds of pages worth of her tweets and comments and articles she'd written and so on, and like a 300 plus page dossier of material that they wanted to have her essentially disciplined for. Now, the panel that heard the case did not discipline her for most of that, only the 4 items where she had specifically identified herself as a nurse. So she doesn't do that anymore in terms of having it in her bio, and that was the distinction that they drew. Where she identified herself as a nurse, they didn't like anything she said, but
right.
Where she identified herself.
Okay, so as long as she doesn't say, this is written by a nurse or whatever in her bio or something like that, because she also is one of the founders for the Canadian Women's Sex-Based Rights group there. So as long as she doesn't say nurse in anything, then they're not going to go after her. Is that what you're saying?
Well, that's the decision that the panel took. I'm not sure that a college wouldn't go after somebody, even if they didn't identify themselves specifically, if they didn't like the speech, and maybe people just happen to know that somebody is a particular profession. I mean, this is not limited to nursing, by the way. We see it in other professions, and more bodies are regulating various professions. Paramedics and daycare workers are starting to get licensed. Ultimately, you end up with an awful lot of people who cannot speak publicly about things where there's a possibility their occupation may be known because they might get hauled in front of their disciplinary regulator. So, I mean, I'm of the view that they ought not to be regulating speech at all. They should be there to regulate ethics and competence, and that's it.
Yeah, interesting times for sure. And there's a couple of things that the U.S. government has pushed back in Canada on, the Online Streaming Act and the Online News Act. And both of those could be seen as curtailing freedom of speech as well. Are those things that you're looking at as well? Or?
Yes, absolutely. When we start, I assume that our government is going to try and bring back the online harms bill in some form, and certainly if it does, we'll be all over it. There's a lot of concerns about it, obviously, and I just think that the trend globally through the West is to have a much more censorious environment. There are certain views that are being protected for some reason, and anything that kind of challenges these sort of centralized narratives is getting censored and canceled. So, we have to fight back against that kind of thinking that only certain views are allowed to be expressed. We're going to end up feeling like we're living in some sort of a totalitarian society ultimately if these things keep marching along at the pace they are. So we're seeing with the Free Speech Union, we're connected with several other sister organizations. We're expanding to other countries. So we're in the UK, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, and South Africa. We've got some others in the pipeline as well. A lot of countries that have historically had free speech, but they're backsliding. And that's where we really want to get involved, is helping to kind of restore that culture of freedom of expression. Because ultimately, if you can't talk about your rights, if you can't talk about anything, that's controversial, you do not live in a democracy, because you can't engage practically in the democratic experience.
I think a lot of people need to go look up that word democracy in a dictionary, because it's allowing people to speak that you don't agree with, not necessarily only the people that you agree with. Do you see what's happening in the United States as hope and that spreads? Because we've seen this kind of, the UK, Europe, and that kind of censoring, and then Canada censoring. And then all of a sudden there's a change in administration, and there's a kind of like a change in ideology definitely down in the United States. And J.D. Vance has come out and even, I think, threatened the UK and Canada with, the State Department just issued a directive against Canada on the Online Streaming Act. Do you see that as supportive for the work that you do here in Canada?
Yes. Certainly any efforts to sort of reinvigorate the ideas of liberalism, small L liberalism, those principles on which the United States was founded, and other Western countries that came about and were successful in the Enlightenment. Those are important foundations, and we're forgetting about them. So a good reminder from our neighbors to the south is appreciated. But I also do worry about backlash, about things the pendulum swinging too far in another direction. So I'm mindful of that as well. The sweet spot never really seems to stick, where we respect one another and express our views and don't go too extreme one way or the other. But it is.
Canada used to be like that, where you could say things and not get all mad at each other. You could have a different opinion, and people would say, "Oh, that's so cool," right? Because it was a country that was great. It does seem to be less tolerant in many of the things that we say these days, more judgment. And to me, it seems like it accelerated during COVID, where people thought they had the right to censor each other a lot more. And we saw that with the social platforms, when there was political pressure put on these social platforms to actually do a lot of censorship.
Right. Yes, there definitely was. And we learned about it. And so fortunately, one thing that's different about this time period is that we do get to reach out and connect with people across the world and find out these kinds of things. Past historical periods, I'm sure there was a lot of propaganda and control too, but now we see it and can fight against it a little bit more aggressively. So COVID was certainly part of it. I think it's been gearing up this way for a long time. I think this censorious culture has been growing for decades. And as certain people sort of have control over various institutions, they use their powers now to enforce their worldview on everybody else. And so.
You mentioned a lot of countries when you talked about where your organization is growing into. You didn't mention the United States. Is there not a need in the United States, or because of their First Amendment rights, or?
Yeah, and, there is another organization that is doing a lot of the same work in the United States. It's called FIRE, Foundation. Actually, I can't remember the exact meaning of the acronym, but they do a lot of great work in this. So I think there was probably not really as much of a need. And the other thing is, the United States has a very robust constitution, and particularly around free speech. They are much now, they have their issues, and we saw that during COVID with the government going through the back door and trying to censor people on Twitter and so on through tech platforms. But in theory, at least, they have a much more robust platform, or a protection, I should say, for free speech.
It is.
They have exported a lot of their culture war stuff to the Western countries, other Western countries, but they haven't exported the tools for defending against it. And that's why I think Britain and Canada and other countries are struggling. These are not necessarily our battles. We've imported a lot of this culture war battle from the United States, but we're sitting ducks a little bit because we don't really have quite as robust a protection for
we get the one side, but we don't get the defense mechanism that they built right into their Constitution and Bill of Rights and all that stuff. Because there's a lot of people that say our charter is a lot weaker than theirs when it comes to freedom of expression.
Well, it is, and we have something called the limitation clause, right? So our rights are subject to reasonable limits as may be demonstrably justified in a free and democratic society. Lots of words in there that can be subjectively interpreted to limit our speech. And I think we spend a lot more time in this country deciding how broad the limits should be rather than how robust the underlying freedom should be.
Yeah, we spend more time trying to curtail it and see how we can box it in as opposed to how we can increase the expression, right? And it seems to be we're looking at it from the wrong way if you're thinking about it from a freedom of expression as opposed to how do we shut people up, right? So, yeah, I do thank you for your time today, and we'll be watching this case. Obviously, this one is close to home for us because it is in British Columbia. So. And thank you for all the work that you're doing out there. And if people want to reach out to you, is there a website or something like that, or how do people find you?
Yeah, well, you can find me and Free Speech Union at fsucanada.ca. fsucanada.ca.
There you go. And and your law firm you work with is
it's called Libertas Law.
Okay.
Also
awesome. Thank you, Lisa, and enjoy the rest of your day. I really do appreciate you taking the time to chat with us today. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. Bye for now.
And thank you for watching Now Media.
We don't just report the news. We live here too. We're your neighbors, bringing you stories that matter to all of us. No government funding, no outside influence. Kelowna Now, local, independent. News you can trust.